Oh, hi. My name is Chip Kingsbury. I'm with the Association for Faculty Enrichment and Learning and Teaching. And today we're doing a short video here about educative assessment. But how do we make the assessment of student learning something that becomes a learning process itself? So let's move forward. And that didn't do anything. Okay, how do we slide? Okay. Uh, We're going to look here at Wolver. Barbara Wolver is one of the leading authors and researchers in the field of student assessment. And from one of her books, she says that the systemic collection of information about student learning using the time, knowledge, expertise, and resources available in order to inform decisions about how to improve learning. That's her definition of what assessment is. Everything you do has a point, and the point is to improve learning. It's got a bit of a double entendre there in that it's both learning, how do we improve student learning, but also me as a teacher, how do I improve my teaching? So how do I learn to be a better teacher? So it works in both of those ways. So we're going to kind of work with that kind of in mind, that we want to do assessment that improves student learning rather than just gives them a score or just ranks them against other students, or just says who got an A and who got a B, or who gets a high honors and who gets an honors and who gets a first class degree and whatever. But we want to do a kind of assessment that actually is a learning process. This is the kind of thing we want to kind of avoid. Here's a quote from a student who talks about a situation where he or she had struggled with a course. It says, if you're under a lot of pressure, then you will just concentrate on passing the course. I know that from bitter experience. One subject I wasn't very good at, I tried to understand the subject and I failed the exam. Then I retook the exam and I just concentrated on passing the exam. I got 96%, and the guy couldn't understand why I failed the first time. I told him this time I just concentrated on passing the exam rather than understanding the subject. Still don't understand the subject, so it defeated the object in a way. We obviously want to avoid this kind of thinking by students that the only important thing really here is just pass the course and get on with my life. We want this to be student-centered. We want the students thinking about their learning and who they're becoming. So this is the kind of assessment we definitely want to avoid. Educative assessment moves beyond just a marking scheme, a list of right and wrong answers. It also moves beyond just a simple rubric, which we will talk about later. But it moves toward a type of assessment where our evaluation of the learning that is focused on the learning and the learners, or the learning of the learners. So we talk about using criteria-based assessment. Now, criterion-based assessment is another whole video or another whole subject. But basically what we're saying here is that when you're doing criterion-based assessment, that there are set criteria that are established and are given to the learners. These are criterion based on what it is they need to do in order to obtain certain levels of proficiency. So if they want to get an A, or they want to get a 90%, or they want to get, or they're happy to get B's or whatever, or they just want to know what's expected of them, we set criterion and we say for whatever the assignment is, if it's an exam, if it's an essay, if it's a project, if it's an interview, if it's a video, whatever it is they're doing that's going to be assessed, you set up the criteria of what really high quality level work is, good quality, average quality, poor quality, and totally unacceptable quality. And you let them know exactly what that is. That's what we mean by criterion-based learning or assessment, criterion-based assessment. That compares to what we call traditional assessment, which is norm-based, where students are put on a bell curve. And most students get C's and just a few get A's. And in that situation, students have to compete with each other to get good marks. They don't know what they need to do in order to succeed. They only know they have to do better than the other students. So here we're going to make it very clear for them using criterion-based assessment. Some of the advantages of this are it promotes collaboration. Here we find that that research shows that criterion-based assessment, students are free to work with each other, and nearly everybody's learning increases. So good students can work with poor students can work with each other, they can work with good students, it doesn't matter. But everybody's learning increases when people work together. And the criterion-based assessment gives them the freedom to do that because they're not having to compete with each other. The second one here is that students know exactly what they need to do to be successful. This reduces stress and it builds confidence. When the student's not stressed out about what's going to happen in the exam, what's going to be on the exam, but they know what their criterion are, they know what they have to do in order to get the grade or the marks they want, then it reduces stress, their confidence goes up, and they can focus on what they actually need to do because what they need to do has been made very clear to them. The third thing here, it says it emphasizes learning over marking because the students aren't worried about getting a percentage or a score. They're worried about achieving a criteria that's been listed. The quality of the video or the quality of the paper or whatever it is. They're focusing on their learning rather than getting a certain mark. The fourth one here, it says it allows for class-to-class or institution-to-institutional comparison. This just makes for things to easily standardize. If students work on a certain course needs to be compared to what would be done in a different college or in a different university, you can say, well, these are the criterion we use, and it'll be easy for courses to be compared from one university to the next. And of course, it provides much better feedback to improve learning because you know exactly the criterion that you've used to mark a student. And it's not just like, oh, this paper feels like a C+. It just kind of feels that way after I read it. But you're not really sure why you're giving it that. But when you have the criterion listed, you're going to be able to give very specific feedback because you're going to be able to find those criteria and inform the student. If we want to make assessed work a learning opportunity, there are certain things we need to do. First of all is whatever we ask the students to do needs to be authentic tasks. These are the kind of real life tasks that learners have to do in their day-to-day lives and the kind of things they will need to be doing in their professions. So like if you're training students to be botanists, then they need to know a lot of things about botany, but nobody's ever going to come into their office when they're working as a botanist and ask them, what are the 6 stages of photosynthesis? Nobody's ever going to ask them that. So when we ask them that on an exam, we are giving them an inauthentic task. So we want to give them tasks that are appropriate, meaningful, significant, and they are the kind of things that students actually have to do in their professions. The second item here is frequent assessment. The more opportunities students have to be assessed, the better the learning is. There's good research on this, that if you wait until the second to last week of the semester to give the midterm, and then the last week you give the final exam, students' learning is going to be very poor compared to if they had lots of opportunities throughout the semester to be assessed in the learning. But that's only true if they're given feedback on those assessed opportunities. They get the feedback, they get their marks, and they get constructive feedback that helps them. So frequent assessment is very important. The next one here is no guesswork assignments. Never ask your students to discuss something because they don't really know what are the parameters of discuss. You want to give them assignments that are crystal clear. Our assignments should not be a test of whether the students can understand us or can second guess us or can read our minds. Give them a very crystal clear, just like if they were employed in an office somewhere, their employer would ask them, give them some very specific tasks to complete, and it wouldn't be guesswork for them. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Iterative assignments. These are assignments that you turn them in stages. So a student starts off with a concept paper for it's a big term paper that he or she's working on. But they turn in a 2-paragraph half-page concept for that. You give them feedback on it. Then you ask them to turn in an outline, and then maybe their rough draft, and then maybe a final draft. So it comes in iterations. It comes in it's marked over time. And each time you give them good feedback on it, the likelihood is that they're going to end up turning in a much better project. Whereas if you wait until the very end and you just say, okay, give me that term paper, and you read it and you realize, gosh, they didn't understand, they're going to have lots of problems. Whereas if it's iterative, they're much more likely to get the constructive feedback they need, which will allow them to learn better. Feedback should be quick and meaningful. There is good research that shows that the length of time between the assignment and the feedback that they get on that assignment makes a huge difference to how much weight the students give to that feedback. So if you write them a very full feedback with lots of constructive ideas on their paper, but you give it to them 2 weeks after they turned it in, they're likely to just look at the mark and move on. They're not likely to pay much attention. But if you get it back to them the next day or within a couple of days, then they're much more likely to be able to focus on that feedback and to use it. So make the feedback constructive so that it's not just, this is poor work, but tell them what was poor about it, or good insights shown here, or something that shows exactly what was good or what needs to be worked on in your feedback. The next one has to do with focusing tasks on the learners and their learning. So anytime you can give them a task that's about them or about their context, you're way ahead. It gives the students a sense of ownership over their learning. They feel like this is my learning. This is my course, my life that I'm building. This is my education that I'm building for it. I'm becoming a professional in this area. A side benefit to making assignments about the students is that it almost does away with the problems of copying, plagiarism, people getting papers off the internet, because the likelihood that anybody's written a paper about me on the internet is almost zero. In fact, I'm sure it's zero. So, make it about them. So if it's a project of something, ask them, write about this in your context or in your home or in your experience with this. Pick a thing that happened to you and write about it, about this subject in that context. So make it about them as much as possible. And then number 7 is reward meaning making over sense making. Now, the difference between these can be a little complicated, but meaning making has to do with the students adopting and internalizing the meaning of something rather than just understanding it. We understand all kinds of things in life, but they don't guide us, they don't drive us, they don't become a part of our worldview. But when something that you learn becomes a part of who you are, a way you approach things, the way you think about an issue, then you've made meaning out of it. So when students are actually doing that and they're showing that they're making meaning out of something rather than just understanding it, you need to reward that, and that'll help students to move in that direction. Students might like being rewarded. It's something good for them, so they're likely to move ahead with that. Some students are motivated by grades. Some are more motivated by the learning. So actually what I'd like you to take some time, to go ahead in a moment, I want you to pause the video, but I want you to think about these 2 questions. What are the indicators that a student is motivated by grades? And what are some indicators that students are motivated by actual learning? What would be things you could see going on in them, the way they work, the way they participate in class, the kind of work they do, the assignments they do? What is it, something that they could say or do that would indicate to you, this student's motivated by grades, this other student's motivated by the learning itself? So go ahead and pause the video, take a moment, make some notes to yourself, and then we'll come back. Okay, back to our section here on motivation, because you were just talking about whether you were just asking yourself, what are the things that motivate students who are grade motivated and those who are learning motivated? So now we want to think about how do we increase motivation for learning for either of those students? If you have students that are grade motivated, you want to begin moving them, shifting them toward being motivated by the actual learning. If you've got students that are motivated by learning, you want to increase that in them. So either way, we want to look at a few of these things here. So it says we may increase our students' motivation for learning when our courses do a few things. So I've got four bullets here. First one says that learning goals and assignments are made clear, they're challenging, they're relevant, they're important to and about the student. This is maybe a bit of a summary of some of the things we've already said, but if you can make the goals and the assignments about the students, even when you're writing learning outcomes for your classes, if you, instead of saying the student will be able to, write it to them, say, you will become a botanist in this class. You will become a convincing communicator in this class, whatever it is, but talk to them about themselves in the context of their learning. But make it challenging, but make it relevant. Make it something that you think the students are going to find important, and make it about the students. Those are not easy to do because traditionally we tend to focus on the learning itself. But if we're going to focus on the learners, then these are really important things to do. The second one, it says, the marking criteria and expectations for the student's performance are clear, challenging, and fairly applied to everyone. Now, this is where creating a really good rubric that you give to the students when you give them the assignment, whatever it is that they're going to be marked on, graded on, or assessed on, give them what those criteria are, so they know what is expected of them. Make them clear, make them challenging. And then when you have that rubric, actually it helps you to be fair, because when you go to look at all those papers or all those projects or watch those videos they made or listen to the speeches that they're giving or whatever it is you're assessing that they're doing, you've got that rubric right in front of you, and you're looking for those things that you said were important. And you're more likely to treat everybody very fairly, because you're not just going by some whimsical kind of, what tugged at your heart in this, or someone used your favorite color of ink on the paper or whatever, but you're using those criteria. The third one is that teaching strategies that encourage students to engage actively with their subject, their peers, and ourselves in a safe and supportive environment. So if you can use things in your classroom that get them engaged, actively engaged, mentally engaged of course is important, but when they get actively engaged, working in groups, going out and doing a project, having dialogue, having debates, critical debates, all these kinds of things are the kinds of things that will encourage their motivation for learning rather than just for grades. Do this in a place where they feel safe and it's supportive. So if you're going to have students talking about what's going on in their lives, which is important for it to be student-centered, then they need to know that you're not gossiping about them, you're not taking their examples and using them in some paper you're publishing, you're not going to tell their stories elsewhere. They feel safe, they can open up and share, and it's supportive that you're giving them encouragement for participating and being personal in these things. And then again, the issue on feedback. This is so important. I'm not good at this myself. I'm really bad, but it's so important to give feedback that's timely. In other words, it comes back quickly. You don't take a long time. It's frequent, that you give lots of feedback. You don't wait until the end of the semester. It's informative. In other words, it gives them information about what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong, and it's constructive. It gives them some ideas of the direction they need to go in order to improve whatever it is that you're giving them feedback on. It recognizes their achievements and encourages students to attribute success and failure to their own effort. So instead of saying, that teacher grades too hard, or that lecturer doesn't like people from my community, or whatever it is, they're more likely to say, I got feedback, I was able to correct it, this is about my work and the progress I'm making. So I hope that this video, we're at the end, right? This video has been helpful for you to begin thinking about how to make the assessment that you do with your students something that helps them learn as well as gives them just marks. And thank you very much.